One of my favorite things to do in card games is completely warp the way they're supposed to play, and Galactus is an excellent example of that in Marvel Snap. Not only can you win a lot of games that you have no reason winning, but also it can make your opponent extremely angry, which, for me, is a lot of fun. If you want to annoy your opponent as well and win a bunch of games, well, you're in luck. My name's Ethan for the Gamer, and today we're going to talk about cards that synergize well with Galactus in Marvel Snap. So Galactus is probably my most played archetype in all of Marvel Snap, and I think it is a blast to play and so much fun. I will get this right out of the way to start the video. This deck has a pretty high win rate, but a very low cube rate. It's pretty easy to see that you're playing Galactus, and if your opponent can't beat that, or they just don't want to deal with it, a lot of times they'll concede early, so you need to make strategic use of your snapping if you want to climb with Galactus. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the cards that synergize really well with Galactus, and what makes it work. So your primary win condition is Galactus himself, and how this works is when you play this on a location, if there's no other cards there, you destroy all the other locations, and that includes every card that's at those locations as well. Now, as you notice, he's only 2 power for 6 energy, so that alone isn't going to win the game. So there are 2 different ways that we can make this win for us. And the first one is by getting him out early. So one major key factor in order to win with Galactus is being able to get a lot of energy early, and the 2 big ways to get him out are either with Wave, which is your primary one, which is on reveal, all cards cost 4 until the end of your next turn, which would be Galactus or Destroyer or any of your other big stuff, or Electro, which is fantastic in this deck because it gives you 1 extra maximum energy on reveal. Normally it has the negative ongoing effect if you can only play 1 card a turn, but we have a lot of ways to destroy him and negate that downside if we want. So those are the 2 big ways you can get out Galactus early, but of course you're not going to draw every card every game, so you need some backup plans. And so there's a couple different ways that we can do this. My favorite way to do this is with Nimrod, and how Nimrod works is when it's destroyed, it gets a copy to every other location. So even if you just play Nimrod on turn 5 in one of the locations, and then Galactus on turn 6 in an empty location, Nimrod will bounce to the other locations, and then they'll get destroyed as well, and then they'll all go into the location with Galactus. And if all goes right, you can have a bunch of Nimrods and a Galactus on one location and end up winning the game. Now, another similar card to this would be Wolverine, and it works the same way, because when it's destroyed, it'll come back to life and get +2 power. So if you are playing a lot of stuff like Carnages or Venoms or things that destroy, Wolverine is a lot of good value as well, and something you could absolutely play. Especially if you're missing some of the cards that I'm playing in my list, like you could take out Shuri, for instance, or Dr. Octopus, or whatever else you want, and play Wolverine in its place. Another alternate win condition that we have if you don't get Galactus would be Destroyer. It's just a huge body, being 15 power for 6 energy. It has the on-reveal effect of destroy your other cards, so you can get it out early a lot of times with Wave and just have a huge 15 body, but it'll destroy Nimrods as well, and similar to Galactus, it'll fill all the other lanes with Nimrods to give you a bunch of power. Now, since we are destroying a whole bunch of stuff, one card that I really love in this archetype is Null. This is going to have the combined power of all cards destroyed, and that means if you get Galactus out early, destroy a whole bunch of locations with a bunch of cards, Null is going to get gigantic, and you can play it down at the end of the game for a huge body to win. Similar effect to Null, Death costs 1 less for every card destroyed, so if we're destroying a bunch of cards, Death a lot of times is going to cost either 0, 1, or 2 power. So on the last turn, if this is 0, you can end it with something like just like a Null for 6, Death for 0, get 12 power, and this thing can get absurd. Sometimes it's 40 plus power on its own, which is usually enough to win the game, unless they have Shang-Chi, which they always do for some reason, but that's another video in itself. So then, the rest of the deck is kind of flex spots essentially, but what stuff I like to play is I like Yondu a lot in this deck. Normally it's just a 1-2, destroys a card which isn't super important, but this fuels up our Null as well as our Death, because the card that you destroyed, you'll get the power added to your Null, and it'll make your Death cost 1 less, so it's just great. We're making full use of Destroy in this deck with Carnage. Same principle, it's going to destroy some cards and get bigger. And now since Venom was recently buffed, it is super good in this deck as well. So another alternate win con as you can do is on the last turn of the game, if you don't have Destroyer or Galactus, you can play your Venom and your Carnage. So if you have a Nimrod out, you can eat it with Carnage, the Nimrod will bounce to 2 different locations, and then you have the Venom jump to one of those other locations, eat Nimrod again, it'll get all the power, and then it'll go over into the other lanes, and you have Nimrods all over the place. And that's why I love Nimrod. It is so fun. The last 2 cards I'm playing Shuri. Shuri is fantastic to play, especially if you don't have any of your cards that give you fast mana. So you can play Shuri into something like Nimrod, make Nimrod get 10 power instead of 5, and then when you fill the locations with a bunch of Nimrods, they'll all be 10s instead of 5s, and that is just huge. So if you don't draw your Wave or Electro, you can go Shuri into Nimrod into Galactus. Then all your 10 power Nimrods will fill your lane, and that's super hard to beat a lot of times. And then the last favorite card that I like to play is Dr. Octopus. If you do get down an early Galactus, following it up with the Dr. Octopus will mean you completely fill that lane. Your opponent can't play any more cards for the rest of the game, and that makes sure that you're safe from things like Shang-Chi, Cosmo, or things that are going to screw you up. So then you're safe to play your things like Null and Death on your last turn and ensure that you win the game. There are so many other different cards you can play in this deck. I know a lot of people like Nova as well, especially if you're playing things like Wolverine. Nova works really well because once it's destroyed, again, it's going to give all of your cards +1 power, and there are so many other things that you can play. Something else that's pretty fun if you have the card is Iron Lad. I don't think it's necessarily good, but a lot of times if you play your Iron Lad on 4 and your Galactus is on the top card of your deck, you can just get Galactus on 4 by playing your Iron Lad, and that's really fun. Or getting things like Dr. Octopus or Destroyer. It could be a lot of fun. So Iron Lad is a lot of fun to play. Probably not as good as the rest of the deck, but it's a good time. So there you have my favorite cards to play in a Galactus deck. There are some other interesting cards that you can play that are linked in the blog article down below in the video description. So check that out because it has some other inclusions that you can try out, but this is what I like to play. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful, and make sure you check out thegamer.com for all things gaming, and we'll see you in the next one.